Hey everyone, hopefully you're doing well. Today we are ready to read lesson 67. We have two parts to read. We have part C, which is the story background, and we'll take a look at that map. And then we have chapter 1 of the Golden Touch. So you've already read it one time by now, and now you're ready to read it with me, okay? So let's two-finger track as you read. Today, you will begin reading The Golden Touch, a myth that takes place thousands of years ago in Turkey, a country on the Mediterranean Sea. So let's pause there, and I want you to take a look at that map. Take a look at the map of the Mediterranean Sea. The Mediterranean is a big sea between the continents of Europe and Africa. I want you all to touch Turkey on the map. You can see that Turkey is on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean Sea. All right, let's keep reading. A myth is an old story that often includes gods or goddesses. Many myths try to explain how the world began or where people came from. Other myths describe the adventures of ancient heroes or teach us lessons about how to behave. All right, so I have some questions now. Remember to pause the video to answer the question and then play it when you're ready. What do we call old stories that often include gods and goddesses? How are gods and goddesses different from people? What do many myths try to explain? Why do you think people made up myths about how the world began? All right, let's read in the last little paragraph. The Golden Touch teaches us a lesson about gold. As you read the myth, think about what it means and if its lesson is still true today. All right, so before we begin our story, what kind of touch do you think the Golden Touch is? What kind of lesson do you think this myth might teach us about gold? All right, please find part D. We are ready to read chapter 1. Once upon a time in ancient Turkey, there lived a rich king named Midas, who had a daughter named Marigold. King Midas was very fond of gold. The only thing he loved more was his daughter. But the more Midas loved his daughter, the more he desired gold. He thought the best thing he could possibly do for his child would be to give her the largest pile of yellow, glistening coins that had ever been heaped together since the world began. So Midas gave all his thoughts and all his time to collecting gold. Okay, pause there. What did Midas love more than anything? After his daughter, what did Midas love most? So it went, he loved Marigold the most. What did he love next? What happened to Midas's love for gold when his love for his daughter increased? The more Midas loved his daughter, the more he loved gold. Why did he want so much gold? What was he going to do with it? All right, let's keep reading. When Midas gazed at the gold-tinted clouds of sunset, he wished they were real gold and that they could be herded into his strong box. When little Marigold ran to meet him with a bunch of buttercups and dandelions, he used to say, "Pooh, pooh, child. If these flowers were as golden as they look, they would be worth picking." What color are buttercups and dandelions? Why did Midas think they weren't worth picking? All right, let's continue. And yet, in his earlier days, before he had this insane desire for gold, Midas had shown a great love for flowers. He had planted a garden with the biggest and sweetest roses any person ever saw or smelled. These roses were still growing in the garden, as large, as lovely, and as fragrant as they were when Midas used to pass whole hours looking at them and inhaling their perfume. But now, if he looked at the flowers at all, it was only to calculate how much the garden would be worth if each of the rose petals was a thin plate of gold. So, pause there. In his earlier days, what had Midas done in his garden? Why didn't Midas love flowers anymore? What would Midas calculate now when he looked at his flowers? All right, let's continue reading. It's getting good. After a while, Midas became so unreasonable that he could scarcely bear to see or touch any object that was not gold. Therefore, he passed a large part of every day in a dark and dreary room underground in the basement of his palace. It was here that he kept his wealth. Midas went to this dismal hole whenever he wanted to be particularly happy. After carefully locking the door, he would take a bag of gold coins, or a golden bowl as big as a hat, or a heavy golden bar, or a bag of gold dust. He would bring his precious gold objects from the corners of the room into the one bright and narrow sunbeam that came from the window. He only liked the sunbeam because it made his treasure shine. Midas would then count the coins in the bag, or toss up the bar and catch it as it came down, or sift the gold dust through his fingers. He would often look at the funny reflection of his own face in the polished surface of a golden bowl. At these times he would whisper to himself, "Oh, Midas, rich King Midas, what a happy man you are." But it was strange to see how the reflection of his face kept grinning at him out of the polished surface of the bowl. It seemed to be aware of his foolish behavior and to make fun of him. Okay, let's pause there. Where did Midas like to spend most of his time? What was in that place? Why did he like the sunbeam that came into his basement room? When Midas looked at his reflection in the golden bowl, what would the reflection seem to do? Right. Let's go back to the star, just a little bit left of the story. Midas called himself a happy man, but he felt he was not as happy as he might be. His peak of enjoyment would never be reached unless the whole world became his treasure room, filled with his own gold. One day, Midas was enjoying himself in his treasure room as usual when he saw a shadow fall over the heaps of gold. He looked up and saw a stranger standing in the bright and narrow sunbeam. It was a young man with a cheerful face. King Midas thought the smile on the stranger's face had a kind of golden glow. And even though the stranger blocked the sunshine, the gleam upon all the piled up treasures was brighter than before. Even the corners were lit up when the stranger smiled. Midas knew he had carefully turned the key in the lock, and that no human being could possibly break into his treasure room. So Midas concluded that his visitor must be a god. In those days, gods interested themselves in the joys and sorrows of men, women, and children. Midas had met gods before, and he was happy to meet another. The stranger's face was so kind that it seemed as if he had come to do Midas a favor. We're going to have a few more questions. What would have made Midas even happier than he was? Why was Midas surprised to see the stranger inside the treasure room? So what did Midas think the stranger was? What did Midas think the stranger might do for him? My last question, what kind of favor do you think Midas would ask for? All right, that's all I have for this story today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we will continue reading this in a few days. See ya.